Takumi has been summoned to another world and finds himself standing before the goddess Nolan, but the first thing she does is sincerely apologize because this was all a huge mistake. She explains that when a summoning spell is activated, it randomly selects a bunch of losers from Earth to be isekai'd. But Takumi's life was actually going pretty well, so he was meant to be excluded from the summoning. However, an error occurred causing him to be dragged here alone with all the others. And it's all because the Holy Sidonia Empire decided to recklessly activate the summoning spell. Since Takumi was never meant to be summoned, Nolan brought him up here instead, while all the other summoned heroes went straight to Sidonia. Takumi asks her if she can just send him back to Earth since he was summoned by mistake, but unfortunately, she can't do that. She was so pissed off at Sidonia for using the forbidden summoning spell that she immediately patched it out of this world's magic laws, so no one can move between worlds anymore. And that means Takumi is stuck here permanently. The process also kinda killed him, so there's that too. Takumi starts freaking out upon realizing that he's a disembodied ghost, but only tells him he doesn't have to worry because she has a plan. She can't send him back to Earth, but she can give him a new body and have him become a citizen of this world instead. And as an apology, since this is partially her fault, she offers to grant him her blessing to make his life easier. Takumi doesn't really have much of a choice, so he agrees to be reborn into this world, and Nolan is glad to hear that because it makes this a lot easier for her. She tells him to open his status screen to check out the new life he will have, and when Takumi does, he finds out that Nolan is planning to give him a 17-year-old body, even though he's 40. Nolan tells him not to bother with the minor details, and more importantly, he still needs to pick out his job. She tells him that there are two main classes for jobs, so if Takumi wants something more combat-focused, he can pick things like swordsman, knight, or hunter. But if that doesn't appeal to him, then he could always pick one of the production jobs instead. Takumi doesn't like the idea of having to fight, so he decides to go with a production job after all. Nolan then proceeds to implant the job in his soul, along with a bunch of other bonus blessings, and sends him on his way, completely forgetting to give him a tutorial. Takumi crash lands in the middle of a forest, and after finally picking himself off the ground, he sees his reflection in the river and realizes that he really has become a different person, and he doesn't have arthritis anymore. He decides to make the best of his new life and goes to look in the bag Nolan dropped off with him to see what's inside. In the bag, he finds some food rations and some money, so it looks like he doesn't have to worry about starving for now. He then takes a look at his status screen, and it looks like Nolan really hooked him up with all the useful skills he could ever need. He even has elemental magic, so he decides to try that out first to see if he can really use it. He opens his hand and calls out water ball, and just like that, a water ball forms in his hand. The other elements work the same way, so Takumi is easily able to use them on his first try, but now he has figured out how his magic works. He has to start thinking about his next move and decides to head for the nearest village. While walking, Takumi comes across a stick in the middle of the path, and it looks like a really nice stick. So he uses his appraisal skill to scan it and finds out that this is Trent wood. It's gotten from the trade monster, and it is really useful for making things like magic staves and spears, so Takumi decides to put his modeling skill to the test and uses it on the wood to create a spear. Since the wood works so well, Takumi decides to scan around to see if there are any other useful plants nearby, and he finds a ton of them, so he spends the next hour picking them, but now he doesn't know what to do with all these. They definitely won't fit in his bag, so he might have to leave them behind, but then Takumi remembers that he has an item box skill, so he uses it to store all the plants. Just then, he hears someone scream, and a few moments later, he sees a little girl run out of the bushes. The little girl comes to him for help because there's a monster chasing after her, and when Takumi turns to see what kind of monster it is, he finds a massive horned rabbit. The rabbit charges at him and nearly impales Takumi, but at the last second, he freaks out and accidentally stabs the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. He is shocked that a beginner like him was able to win against a monster like that, so he assumes it must be because of Nolan's blessing, but Nolan had nothing to do with it. It was just dumb luck. As a result of his fight, Takumi earns the job title of warrior, but he's not happy about it since he was hoping to avoid fighting altogether. But that's not really important right now since he still has to check if the little girl is alright. Molly says she's fine and explains that she was out here picking herbs, but she accidentally got too far from the board village and ended up getting attacked. Upon hearing her mention a village, Takumi gets excited and asks her if it's alright for him to come to the village. Molly tells him she'll show the way, but before that, she asks if he's planning on taking that rabbit with him since their meat is really tasty. Takumi realizes it would be a waste to leave it here, so he stuffs the rabbit in his item box, but immediately after doing so, he realizes that he just did that in front of Molly even though he was planning to keep his item box skill a secret. Well, there's nothing he can do about it now, so he and Molly start walking over to the village. And at the same time, the other people who got summoned have just arrived in the Empire of Sidonia, and they are incredibly confused about what's going on. None of them are hurt, but they have no idea where they are, and all of a sudden, they hear someone call out to them as heroes. A woman approaches and tells them that they are no longer in their original world, and that they have been summoned to use their power as heroes to save this world. She introduces herself to them as the Empress of the Sidonia Empire, Elizabeth, and one look at her face makes the kids realize that she's shady as hell. Just then, Akane's unique skill kicks in, and it seems Nolan granted her the blessing of revelation, so if she follows her gut instinct, she will naturally arrive at the right answer. And right now, Akane's gut is telling her that Elizabeth is a backstabbing bitch, so she can't be trusted. Meanwhile, Takumi has arrived in the bored village, and Molly's parents come out to thank him for saving their daughter. Molly's dad introduces himself as Banga, and his wife over here is Martha. They think Takumi is a really responsible guy to have traveled so far on his own, and on that note, Takumi asks them if it would be alright for him to stay in this village for a while since he has nowhere else to go. They tell him he is welcome to stay, but unfortunately, they don't have an inn in the village, so there's nowhere for him to stay right now. But they could always just build him a house though. All the villagers gather around an empty plot of land and are about to begin work, but Takumi wants to make himself at least somewhat useful, so he uses his earth magic to flatten the ground for the foundation. This is the first time he has used magic on such a wide scale, so he almost passes out from mana depletion. The villagers are all amazed that Takumi can use earth magic so easily, so Takumi asks if they think he just did something strange, but they tell him not to worry about it. Since he has taken care of the foundation, the rest of them get to work assembling his house for him. And by the next morning, Takumi's house has been completed. Thanks to his carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing skills, Takumi was able to make a good set of furniture for himself. But there's something else he's been meaning to try out. He got a bunch of ores from the village blacksmith, boron, so he wants to try using alchemy to extract the metal. He's got iron ore, silver ore, copper ore, and even some magic iron ore. So he starts off with the iron and tries to make an iron ingot from it. Normally this would require a large furnace and hours of work, but with Takumi's alchemy, he can do it all at once, but it drains a ton of his mana in the process. His first attempt at ore extraction was successful, and Takumi is really excited, so he wants to keep extracting as much as possible so he can make stuff with it later. A couple of hours have gone by, so Molly comes over to Takumi's house to bring him some dinner, but when she opens the door, she is shocked to find him passed out on the floor looking like he's been sucked dry. Takumi had overdone it with the ore extraction and nearly died from mana depletion, but Martha and Banga gave him a recovery potion, so he's alright now and can keep practicing his alchemy, although they made him promise not to overwork himself anymore. Over time, Takumi extracted a bunch of iron, copper, and even a bit of gold too, so he was able to make a ton of useful tools with them. And once he was done with alchemy practice, he would spend time with Boron in the forge learning how to make all kinds of weapons. The blade turns out really well, and once Boron is done making the sheath, it will be complete. Takumi's blacksmithing skill is now level 40, so he's done practicing that for now and decides to move on to something else. He goes over to Banga and asks if he can borrow a couple of potions, and Banga has no problem lending him some, but all the potions are basic, so he won't get much use out of them. Takumi tells him that that's fine since all he needs is a template for what a potion should look like. He's thinking of making some potions of his own with all those herbs he gathered in the forest, and Banga is happy to support Takumi in any way he can, so he offers to buy some potions from him if he completes the first batch. Takumi thanks Banga, and after he gets the basic potion, he starts working on his own version. He makes it with some hilcock leaves and water, and when he's done, he puts it in a glass jar so he can compare it to the one he got from Banga. Both of them are blue, but the one Takumi made is notably more blue than the one he got from Banga, plus it seems to have magic in it, but Takumi isn't sure if this is a success or not. He's going to have to test the potion himself to make sure it isn't harmful, but he doesn't want to end up dying if it turns out to be poisonous, so he decides to build up some poison tolerance, and the best way for him to do that is to eat whatever this is until he's about to die, and then use healing magic to cure himself. He's been doing this for a couple of hours now, and he feels like absolute shit. On the bright side, curing himself so much has granted him the purification skill, and that's definitely going to come in handy at some point. As Takumi is getting back to his feet, he hears a noise behind him and finds a massive boar staring him down. The boar clearly isn't friendly, so Takumi grabs his spear and gets ready to defend himself, but as the boar charges at him and he tries to use the spear, it shatters on contact, leaving the boar unharmed and Takumi without a weapon. He tries to use all the magic he has available to him, but none of them do any damage to the boar, so he's starting to panic here. And just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he notices a poison spider behind him, and it looks like it's getting ready to attack, so Takumi is completely cornered. However, instead of attacking him, the spider attacks the boar instead, causing it to miss Takumi. But the boar is still coming for him, so he has to think of something fast. So far, all of his physical attacks have failed, but there's still one thing he hasn't tried yet. As the boar charges at him again, he jumps into the air, and at the moment of contact, he uses his alchemy skill on the boar's head and breaks it down. Thanks to his quick thinking, he managed to survive, and now that he's safe, he decides to go check on the spider since it helped him out earlier. The spider is in really poor shape after it got hit by the boar. He decides to heal it so it doesn't die, and afterwards, he gets up so he can return to the village, but then he receives a notification telling him that he has successfully tamed the spider. He didn't realize it was even possible to take a spider, but he's hesitant to take it with him since the spider is considered a dangerous monster. However, the spider hits him with the cutesy eyes, so he decides to accept it as his pet anyway, and to make it official, he names her Maple. A little while later, Takumi returns to the village and shows everyone the giant boar he killed. They are all amazed that he could defeat something like that, but even more so that he managed to tame a poisonous spider since no one has ever managed to do that before. That aside, Takumi suggests that they all share the boar since he can't finish it alone, so that night a massive feast is held in his honor. While everyone else is having fun, Banga brings the valuable leftovers from the boar to Takumi and tells him he can sell them for money if he heads to the nearest city, Bolton, so that will be Takumi's next destination. All the while, Goddess Nolan has been watching over him, and she's really happy with how well he is progressing. One of her fellow goddesses asks her what she's hoping to achieve by giving Takumi such special treatment. She gave him a special body, a special blessing, and on top of that, she can send him a whole year into the past, before Sidonia actually activated the summoning spell that brought him here, but Nolan says she doesn't have a particular reason for it, she's just doing what she thinks is right. One morning, Takumi finds himself tied up in bed, and he already knows Maple was the one behind it. Maple apologizes, but Takumi has been so busy lately that she felt really lonely and just wanted to get his attention. Takumi realizes he has been so focused on his work that he barely spends any time with Maple, so he decides to take a break from work for the day and play with Maple, which makes her really happy. Just then, Martha walks in to bring Takumi some lunch. It looks like something weird is going on between Takumi and Maple, but Takumi assures her that it's not what she thinks. Martha takes his word for it, but she can't help but notice that the silk Maple produced looks really nice, so she plans to milk Maple dry of as much silk as she can make. Later that day, Martha has successfully created a spider silk shirt, and all the ladies in the village are in love with the texture of the fabric. Takumi hadn't realized spider silk was such a hot commodity, so the ladies explain that spider silk is a luxury item, so only nobles ever get to buy it. Martha asks Maple if she could make some more fabric for her, so Maple starts squirting it out, but this is going to take a while, so she isn't going to get to play with Takumi anymore. Takumi is a little disappointed since he was looking forward to spending time with Maple for once, but he's still got things to do anyway, so he's not too bothered. It has been roughly a month since Takumi first came to this village, and he intends to head to the city soon to study his alchemy, but he can't bring himself to say goodbye to all the villagers after spending so much time with them. Takumi then goes to meet with Boron at the forge so he can continue his blacksmithing practice, and before long, they've made a chest plate that fits Takumi perfectly, as well as some steel toe boots. Boron tells him that the boots will be useful if he ever needs to kick anything, but Takumi doesn't intend to do any fighting since he just wants to be an alchemist. Just then, Bangma shows up, and he's glad to see that Takumi's armor is finally complete, but he's going to miss him once he's gone. He knows Takumi can't stay here forever if he wants to expand his production business, so it's the logical move for him to head to the city where he can sell more of his goods and get a reliable supply of materials. A trader from Bolton is going to come to this village in a couple of days, so Banga arranged for Takumi to ride with him on his way back to Bolton. They are sad to see him go, but they know this is for the best, so they tell Takumi to start getting his stuff ready. Takumi thanks them for all their help and starts heading back to his house so he can pack up, but along the way he runs into Martha while she's carrying a bucket of meat. He asks her what she's up to, so Martha explains that she's on her way to throw away the innards of a horned rabbit that Bangma caught. Apparently, the innards are the most delicious part of the rabbit, but they need to be processed thoroughly to remove all diseases and parasites. This village doesn't have the equipment necessary to do that, so she has to throw the meat away so no one gets sick. However, Takumi tells her that won't be necessary since he can just purify the meat. He bends down and uses purification magic, so the meat in the bucket should be safe to eat now. But while Martha is indeed thankful, she is equally stunned that Takumi can use light magic. She tells him that he probably shouldn't reveal that he can use light magic when he leaves this village because there are very few people in this world who are capable of that, so if people found out he could use it, it would draw a lot of unwanted attention. Takumi takes note of her warning and promises to be careful about revealing his power, but in the meantime, while he's still in the village, he plans to use every bit of his power to make their lives better. He uses earth magic to build up a brick wall for the village's safety, and for convenience, he builds them a water pump as well as a couple of other amenities. By the time he is done, this place looks like a whole new village, so when the merchant arrives, he barely recognizes it. Banga comes out to greet Papek, and after completing their trade deal, Takumi walks up so they can start going. Papek has already heard a lot about Takumi from Banga, so he introduces himself and everyone asks if Takumi has all his stuff ready. Takumi assures them he hasn't forgotten anything, but there is one thing he wants to give them though. He pulls out one of his potions from his bag and gives it to Banga. He already dropped off about 100 of these bottles at Banga's house, so in the event of a disaster, he wants Banga to use these to heal any injuries. Papek is left in shock after seeing the potion Takumi made, so he asks to take a closer look, and it is definitely a high-level potion, although Takumi doesn't seem to realize it. The rest of the villagers soon show up to bid Takumi farewell, so Papek says he will wait for them to finish their goodbyes before he leaves. Molly says goodbye to Maple, who's sleeping in Takumi's sack, and Martha hands him an outfit she and the other ladies made for him out of Maple's silk. Takumi is really grateful for their thoughtful gift and thanks everyone once more for being so kind to him, even though they haven't known him long. He then gets in the carriage and all the villagers give him a huge send-off, telling him he will always be welcome in their village. As Papek and Takumi head for Bolton, Papek mentions that the people of that village seem to really love him. Even the others in the carriage can tell that Takumi was practically family to them, and such a goodbye really tugs at Heath's heartstrings. By the way, these guys are heading for Bolton as well, so the blonde guy introduces himself as Heath, the redhead is Rail, and the gloomy-looking guy over there is named Booger. They are all part of a C-rank party named Lion Fang, and they are currently acting as Papek's bodyguards. Although this region is pretty peaceful, so there isn't actually much for them to do. Rail notices that Takumi is holding onto his bag really tightly, so they ask him if something precious is inside, and Takumi answers, saying his pet killer spider is sleeping inside. The group can't believe Takumi managed to tame a killer spider, so Rail asks to see it, but he's being really creepy about it, so Maple ends up headbutting him in the face. Takumi begins apologizing profusely for what Maple did, but the others tell him there's nothing to be sorry about since Rail deserved it. In fact, Heath wouldn't be surprised if Maple's encounter with Rail makes her fear all humans from now on, but that doesn't seem to be the case since she seems to have taken a liking to Bogar. While everyone starts fawning over Maple, Papek calls Takumi to the front because he wants to talk about the potion he saw Takumi holding earlier. He asks if there are any more of those in stock, because if so, he would love to buy some. Takumi doesn't really mind selling Papek the potions, but all of a sudden, the horse stops and it looks like there's trouble afoot. There is a horde of goblins surrounding the carriage for an attack, which is really bad news, but the others seem pretty excited since this means they finally get to do something, so they tell Takumi and Papek to sit back and let them do all the work as they step out onto the field. There are roughly 20 goblins out in the field, so they are pretty confident they can handle this and start fighting. Rail shoots them down with his bow, while Bogar and Heath attack the rest with their mace and axe. Overall, it doesn't take long for them to wipe out all the goblins, so once they are done, they get to work dissecting the goblins so they can collect the magic stones. And from what Maple has seen so far, she really likes Bogar. She hates Rail, and she doesn't really care about Heath. Shortly after, everyone got back on the carriage and their journey continued for the next 3 days until they finally arrived in Bolton. Once they enter the city, the members of Lion Fang head to the Adventurers Guild to report the success of their bodyguard mission, and Takumi follows them there since he needs to register with the guild to stay in this city. He would have preferred to register with the Alchemist Guild, but there isn't one here, so he's going to have to become an adventurer instead. The receptionist Hans tells Takumi that he can just use the Adventurer Guild card as his identification, and as long as he does his simple quest once every month, it won't expire at all. Takumi ends up registering as an adventurer and also presents Maple as his pet. After all the registrations are complete, Takumi heads to Papek's trading company to work on a deal for the potions. He has roughly 103 different potions in stock, and all of them are extremely high quality, so Papek is prepared to pay 10 silver coins for each healing and stamina potion and 50 silver coins for each mana potion. Takumi does some quick math in his head and realizes that he would make over 7 million yen from this single deal. He thinks that's way too much money, but on the contrary, Papek informs him that he could have made a lot more money if he already had a reputation as a producer. On that note, since Takumi intends to become a producer in this city, Papek recommends that he get a house with a workshop attached for convenience reasons, but Takumi hadn't even thought about where he would be living once he got here. Paypek decides to help him out a little and calls for his assistant Thomas so he can show Takumi a good property with an affordable rate. However, when Takumi finally sees the house, it looks way more like a mansion, so he doesn't think he can afford it. Thomas assures him that the mansion is quite affordable, and he can guarantee that there are no ghosts here, so he won't have to worry about that. Takumi spots the workshop connected to the house, and he starts considering the purchase since this place would be really accommodating for his work. And he can afford to pay for it, since he got a lot of money from selling those potions to Paypek. After a little deliberation, he eventually decides to pay for the mansion, so he tells Thomas he'll take it. Thomas is glad to hear that and says he will get started on the paperwork immediately, so Takumi can move in tomorrow if he wants, but as they are walking through the city streets, Takumi smells something foul in the air. Thomas can tell that the smell is bothering Takumi, so he explains that the foul stench is coming from the sewers. Rich people have magical purifiers to cleanse their sewage, but the main city sewers have no such luxury. Magic purifiers are really rare since they are only found in ancient ruins and dungeons, so they are too expensive to implement in the city sewers. Some priests are periodically hired to manually cleanse the sewers with purification magic, but the sewers are still filthy most of the time. The next day, Takumi and Maple move into their new house, and the first thing Takuma wants to do is find a solution to the sewer problem. He gets a piece of quartz and clay from Paypek's company, and after using magic to shape it, he uses fire magic combined with space-time magic to bake it quickly. After doing that for a while, Takumi's mana was completely drained, so he had to drink a couple of mana potions, but on the bright side, he did manage to complete his creation. A modern toilet. Just then, he hears Paypek screaming from his living room, so he comes out to check what's going on and finds Paypek wrapped head to toe in Maple's silk. Takumi asks Maple why she would do such a thing, but she thought Paypek would find this to be fun. In her defense, the comforting feel of her silk does put Paypek to sleep, but that doesn't make it right, so Takumi sincerely apologizes for Maple's actions. Paypek tells Takumi it's alright, but getting swaddled so suddenly, it'd scare him a little, so he needs to use Takumi's restroom real quick. However, as soon as he enters, he comes back out and starts asking what this marvel of technology is. Takumi comes over and explains that this thing is a toilet. He attached it to a magical purification device so it automatically cleans itself once you're done with your business. Basically, after you take a dump, it uses purification magic to break down your shit into inorganic materials, and then that gets flushed down the drain. The system makes sense to Paypek, but the only way someone could possibly have made such a thing would be if you had an aptitude for light magic. Takumi realizes he may have messed up since Martha clearly warned him against using his light magic openly, so he asks Paypek to please keep this a secret for him. Paypek understands why Takumi would want to keep his abilities a secret, so he promises not to tell anyone, but he absolutely must have some of these toilets, so he asks Takumi if he can make 100 of them for him. Takumi is hesitant to agree since making just one toilet was a lot of work, but since Paypek is being so insistent, he agrees to do it as long as Paypek can provide the raw materials. Paypek is really happy to hear that, but he can't expect Takumi to make all those toilets by himself, so he suggests that Takumi should make a slave contract. Takumi is taken aback by the suggestion since he would never want to get a slave, but Paypek points out that if Takumi is trying to keep his abilities a secret, then it would be best to get a slave to help with his work since a slave would be bound to secrecy. Having aptitude for light magic is a really good big deal since it means you were chosen by God, and as such, the Church of Divine Light would probably come after Takumi to force him to work for them. They make a lot of profit by monopolizing purification magic, so Paypek doubts they would be happy to learn that commoners can have access to cheap purifications through Takumi's toilets. But Paypek already has an idea of how to get around the church, so Takumi doesn't need to worry about it for now. The most important thing is making sure that the church doesn't find out about his light magic. That's why getting a slave would be the best option for him. But Takumi is strictly against slavery, so he says he will just do all the work by himself. Just then, his guild card begins glowing, so Takumi takes a look at it, and it displays a message saying he needs to complete a verification quest to maintain his status as an adventurer, so it looks like he won't have time to make the toilets by himself after all, so he caves and agrees to buy a slave. Paypek takes Takumi to the Mulan Trading Company since they are the most ethical slave traders around. Paypek goes off the top with the owner so he can get Takumi a good deal, and in the meantime, Takumi heads out into the garden because it looks pretty. There he finds a beautiful elf girl sitting on a terrace, but the second she sees Takumi, she tells him to get out of here. A little while later, Paypek introduces Takumi to the owner of the slave trading company, Mulan, and tells her that Takumi is interested in purchasing a slave from her. Although he mentions that Takumi was really reluctant about the idea of purchasing a slave, Mulan asks him if there's a specific reason for this, so Takumi explains that in the land where he comes from, selling and buying people was abolished long ago, so doing it here doesn't sit right with him. Mulan can understand Takumi's concerns, but she assures him that in this nation at least the rights and privileges of slaves are preserved to some extent. Basically, it works like this. The owner pledges to respect the slave's basic rights, providing food, clothing, and shelter, while the slave pledges to fulfill their duties. Said duties are clearly laid out in the contract for the slave. But aside from that, the contract also makes it impossible for either the master or the slave to cause lethal harm to one another. Takumi is quite pleased to learn this since it means the slave contract is pretty much a regular job with some rules attached. Mulan goes on to explain that there are several different kinds of slave contracts. In the case where someone becomes due to debt, they will be contracted until they earn enough money to pay back that debt. Other contracts are more permanent and are usually taken by criminals or people who end up being captured in war as an alternative to death. However, the large majority of slave contracts are made by those who were illegally forced into it by bandits. Payback thinks the most suitable one for Takumi would be a war slave since they can't be released without their master's permission, and while Mulan could certainly make that happen, she asks why there is a need to make sure the slave can never leave Takumi. Payback starts talking about how talented Takumi is with production and how he doesn't want his secrets to be stolen, but Mulan wants to hear the reason from Takumi himself. Takumi explains that he is a producer, so naturally he would like to focus on his work as much as possible, but that's a little hard to do since he also has to fulfill quests from the Adventurers Guild. He is currently living in a mansion, so he will need someone to help manage it while he does his work, and due to some particular skills he possesses, he would like to make sure his slave can't tell anyone about him. Additionally, since he will be taking on quests from the Adventurers Guild and harvesting ingredients himself, he also needs his slaves to be a capable fighter so they don't get hurt when they accompany him. Mulan realizes that Takumi has no ill intentions, but there's no way she's allowing him to force a single slave to do both housework and combat, so she'll only work with him if he agrees to buy 2 separate slaves instead. That being said, she knows someone who would be perfect as Takumi's housekeeper, so she calls for Maria to come into the room. Maria was forced into slavery as a child and has been trained in reading, writing, math, and general housekeeping, so she should be a good fit for the job. Maria says she can handle the housework of a mansion all by herself, and Takumi is glad to hear it, but Maria can tell that he's deep in thought, so she asks if something is wrong. Takumi tells her he's just a little confused since he doesn't understand why no one has bought yet Maria considering how cute and capable she is. Maria gets all embarrassed by Takumi calling her cute, so he apologizes since it might have been inappropriate to say. Maria calms down and tells Takumi that she can only do the housekeeping work outlined in the contract and nothing else. Takumi says he's fine with that since he only wants her to do housekeeping work, but Maria wants to make it very clear that she won't do anything else. Takumi doesn't understand why she's talking about it so much since Mulan already explained how these contracts work, but then Maria blurts out that she can't sleep with Takumi. Now Takumi gets embarrassed as well, but he assures Maria that he really does only want her as a housekeeper, not a meat keeper. With that said, Takumi asks Maria if she still wants to form a contract with him, and she says she'd be happy to work with him. Now that that's settled, Mulan says she'll begin working on the contract for Maria, but as for the battle servant, she says she unfortunately doesn't have anyone who fits the description. Maria hears Mulan say this and calls BS because she knows Sophia is still here, but Mulan doesn't take kindly to being called out, so she tells Maria to go back to her room and start packing her things. Once Maria is gone, Takumi asks Mulan if what Maria said was true, and Mulan admits that there is a battle slave in the building, that she doesn't think Sophia would be a good fit for Takumi since she's got a lot of problems. Mulan wants to end the discussion here, but Takumi is kind of curious about Sophia, so he asks to see her. Mulan reluctantly agrees to take Takumi to meet Sophia, and when they arrive at her room, Sophia is surprised to see that the visitor is the boy she met in the courtyard earlier. Mulan informs Takumi of Sophia's history and explains that she was captured as a slave of war in the battle between the Kingdom of Triaria and the Kingdom of Ugar. Although this all happened more than 50 years ago. Takumi is shocked to find out that Sophia is more than 50 years old, so Mulan goes on to explain that the Kingdom of Ugar was an elf nation and elves naturally live long lives. Sophia hasn't been able to form a contract with anyone because she has a hideous scar on her ears, and her right hand and left leg both have impaired movement. This would already be a deal breaker for anyone looking to buy a battle slave, but on top of that, she also lost use of the elemental magic that elves are most known for, so it's likely that she has a curse on her. Given all these facts, Mulan doesn't think Sophia will be able to help Takumi on his quests, but Takumi wants to confirm it for himself, so he asks to have a minute alone with Sophia. Mulan decides to give him some time to talk to her, and once they are both alone, Takumi grabs Sophia's face and looks into her eyes. He isn't a fan of using appraisal on people without permission, but he needs to check what he's dealing with. He takes a look at Sophia's status screen, and to his surprise, he finds out that her stats are through the roof. Her injuries do limit her abilities, and she does have a curse on her. But if Takumi can fix that, then she will be the perfect companion to have in a battle. Mulan soon comes back into the room to Takumi if he has made a decision yet, so he tells her he wants to take Sophia. Sophia can't believe he wants her and reminds him of all her flaws. But Takumi says he's going to fix it, so it won't be a problem. Mulan thinks Takumi's confidence is pretty interesting, so she agrees to leave Sophia as Takumi's care. A few minutes later, Mulan finalizes the terms of the contract, so the final step is to execute it. The three of them gather together, and Mulan uses magic to bind them to the terms of the contract, so once she's done, Maria and Sophia officially become Takumi's slaves. Maria thanks him for purchasing her and promises to work hard to live up to his expectations, and so does Sophia. The three eventually return to Takumi's house, and as soon as he opens the door, Maple comes jumping out because she's excited to see him again. Both Maria and Sophia are worried for Takumi's safety, so Sophia is about to attack Maple. But before she does, Takumi stops her and explains that Maple is actually his pet killer spider. The two find it strange, but they decide to just act like it's normal, and a little while later, Takumi shows them to one of the empty rooms in the mansion. Sophia and Maria really like it, so Takumi tells them that Sophia can have this one and Maria can take the room next door. Neither of them can believe that Takumi is willing to give them their own rooms, but it's not like he's using the rooms anyway, so he thinks it would be nice if someone got some use out of it at least. Additionally, there's also a large bath, so he tells them that once they are done unpacking, they can use the bath whenever they like, and Maria is really excited about it. Later on, Sophia and Maria get into the bath, and Maria talks about how glad she is that Takumi bought Sophia as well. If she's being honest, she thought Mulan was never going to let Maria leave because over the past 50 years, no matter how much was offered, Mulan rejected anyone who offered to buy Sophia. So for her to sell Sophia to Takumi, she must have seen some good in him. Sophia admits that Takumi seems kind, but she's still a bit skeptical since they know so little about him. While Mulan was drawing up the contracts for the sale, Sophie got a glimpse of Takumi's file, and most of Takumi's history records, like hometown or lineage, were left blank, so if he is keeping that information secret, then there must be something he is hiding. After they are done with their bath, they head outside and are shocked to see that Takumi already prepared dinner for them. Maria is especially devastated since household work is meant to be her job, so if Takumi handles everything himself, then she's as useless as a toilet. Takumi explains that he was just trying to make Maria's first day in the job a little easier, but if it makes her feel better, he will let her handle the rest of the chores on her own. For now, he asks them to sit down so they can all have dinner together, but Sophia is hesitant since servants usually don't get to eat at the same table as their master. Takumi understands that she may think his behavior is strange for a slave owner, but he doesn't want her to get stuck up on tradition. And speaking of tradition, he doesn't really like the fact that they keep calling him master, so he asks if they can just call him by his name instead. Sophia asks if that's a formal order, but Takumi doesn't want to have to force her to call him by name if she doesn't feel comfortable with it. Although Maria seems fine with calling him by name. The next day, Takumi heads to Papek's trading company to pick up a package he ordered, and Papek says he did his best to wrap it up securely, but he still wants Takumi to be careful when carrying it home. On his way home, Takumi notices a church nearby, so he heads inside and kneels down to pray to Nolan. He thanks her for all the skills she gave him since they've really helped him, but there's something he's been meaning to ask her. In the time he has spent in this world, he learned that the Holy Empire of Sidonia controls the religious doctrine here, so he doesn't understand why Nolan has so much beef with them. Just then, Takumi hears Nolan's voice and sees her standing in front of him, so he freaks out a little. Nolan explains that she heard him praying to her, so she brought him up here so they could have a little chat. And to answer his question from before, she doesn't like Sidonia because they don't follow her will. There are two religions in this world, the Church of Creation and the Church of Divine Light. The Church of Creation has worshipped Nolan since it began, but the Church of Divine Light just does whatever the hell it wants. The Sidonian Empire ended up going on several crusades to spread their religion forceful means, but while all this was happening, Nolan chose to stay out of it since she didn't want to get involved with the petty affairs of humans. Takumi points out that that was dumb move since the only reason Sidonia was able to activate the summoning spell that brought him here was because Nolan didn't intervene until it was too late. And yeah, it sounds bad when he puts it like that, but she gave him all her blessings to make up for her mistake. Although there is something she needs to tell him. Most of her blessings will remain with him forever, but there is one that will fade away. And that's the unusually great luck he has been having recently. She basically gave him a beginner's tutorial by allowing him to meet such nice and helpful people, but soon he will end up meeting people with sinister intentions, so from now on, the results of his actions completely depend on him. A little while later, Takumi returns home, but as soon as he walks in the door, he trips over Maple, who is really excited to see him. Both Sophia and Maria come to check on him, but when Sophia tries to help pick up the package Takumi brought, he quickly stores it in his item box to stop her from touching it. He then gets up and says he's going to do some work in his workshop, so they shouldn't bother him for a while. But Sophia is incredibly suspicious because that package had high-grade magical wrapping paper on it, so it must have been something dangerous. She follows Takumi to his workshop to see what he's up to, and she's horrified to see him dipping a knife in poison and cutting himself with it. He immediately heals himself afterwards, but you've got to admit he looks crazy doing this, so as soon as he randomly mentions Maria's name, Sophia thinks he plans to do something to her and attacks him. Or at least she tries to, but she faints from exhaustion almost immediately, so she just collapses on top of Takumi. Takumi checks her status to figure out what's wrong with her, and he discovers that she is suffering from extreme exhaustion, likely due to her curse. A wound like this normally wouldn't be that difficult to heal, but because of the curse, it takes a lot of effort for Takumi to finally heal her hand, and once he's done, his light magic levels up. He later carries Sophia up to her room, and since his light magic leveled up, he now has enough power to dispel her curse, so he pours all his magic into it, and eventually he's able to fully heal Sophia as well as lift her curse. She's still unconscious due to the exhaustion, but she should be fine once she gets a little rest. A couple hours later, Sophia wakes up, and when she sees Maria, she warns her to run because from what she saw, she is sure Takumi is an absolute lunatic. Maria doesn't know what Sophia is talking about, but she is sure that Takumi is a good person more than ever before. She holds a mirror up to show Sophia what Takumi did for her, and she is shocked to realize that her body has been healed and her magic has returned. She heads outside to talk to Takumi about it, and he confirms that he did get rid of her curse. It took a lot of pain and hard work to level up his skill, but he tells her she doesn't have to worry about it since he already promised to heal her. Sophia realizes that she had completely misjudged Takumi, so she kneels down and pledges to serve Takumi for the rest of her life for the kindness he has shown her. The next morning, Takumi heads to the library to see if he can find any information about alchemy, but it turns out that the entire library only has 4 books on alchemy. Takumi is confused and wonders why alchemy isn't more popular when it's so simple to understand, but in reality it isn't easy at all. All the alchemy texts available are written in this world's ancient language, so the only reason Takumi can understand any of what's written here is because Nolan gave him a blessing that allows him to understand every language in this world. Later that day, Takumi, Maria, and Sophia finish making a bunch of toilets, and while there's still a lot more to go, they're making good progress, so Takumi thinks he should be able to take a break for toilet making for a while. If he won't be making any more toilets for now, Maria asks Takumi what he intends to do, and Takumi answers that he plans to go on some journeys in the near future. Specifically, he wants to try finding new alchemy ingredients, and while he's at it, he wants to see the unique sights this world has to offer and maybe explore some ruins along the way. He already plans to take Sophia with him as his bodyguard, so he's going to have to ask Maria to stay behind and take care of the house while he's gone. However, Maria doesn't like the sound of that. She asks Takumi if she can accompany him on his journey, but he doesn't think that'd be a good idea since the journey is bound to be dangerous. Plus, he mainly hired Maria because he needed a maid to take care of the mansion, so it would defeat the purpose if he took her with him. Maria understands Takumi's point, but being left alone in the mansion would make her feel terribly lonely, so she pleads with Takumi to reconsider. Takumi would feel bad about leaving Maria all alone, but before he makes any decisions, there's something he needs to check, so he grabs Maria's face and uses appraisal to check her stats. And unexpectedly, Maria is pretty stacked. Don't get me wrong, she's not overpowered, but she could definitely handle herself in a fight, so Takumi agrees to bring her along for the journey as long as she's sure she can handle. Sophia says she's willing to teach Maria how to use magic and fight to make sure she is ready for any possible threats, and Takumi likes the sound of that, so he asks Sophia to train both him and Maria. Since they've decided that Maria will be joining the expedition, Takumi thinks it's about time he starts making equipment for everyone, so to start he asks Sophia what kind of weapon she would like. Sophia doesn't hesitate and begins listing off an entire arsenal of weapons she would like, but that's to be expected since she is an experienced warrior. Maria, on the other hand, doesn't know much about weapons, but she did receive a little short sword training from Yulan, so she tells Takumi that a set of battle knives will be fine for her. However, Sophia points out that having only battle knives will put Maria at a disadvantage when it comes to reach, so she should probably get a spear as well. Maria doesn't know how to use a spear, so Sophia offers to give her a quick training montage to show her the basics, and while they do that, Takumi begins working on the weapons. Doesn't take him long to finish crafting all the blades, but it drains a ton of his mana, so he has to drink a mana potion to recover before he can continue. The final step for the blades is for Takumi to cast an attack and auto-repair enchantment on them, so he doesn't have to perform maintenance as often, and once that's done, the blades are finally complete. Now he's going to move on to the handles, but since Maria requested for battle knives, she's going to need a sheath for them. And even though Takumi is a gentleman, he's still a man of culture, so imagining Maria's thick thighs with knives on them nearly makes him pass out. Moving on, the next thing he needs to make is the armor for the girls, but rather than simply asking them to let him measure their sizes, Takumi has a much better idea. He opens up his item box and pulls out 2 life-size dolls of Maria and Sophia he had already made with his Appraisal X skill. But don't ask why he made them though. As for the armor itself, Takumi plans to make it using Maple's silk and some of the hide he got from the armored boar. And when it comes to the design, he's never had the chance to make armor for others before, so he decides to let his mind run wild and try out all of his outfit fantasies with those dolls. After several days and several redesigns, Takumi finally gives the armor to Maria and Sophia, and it looks great on them. He asks the two if they like it, and both are honestly surprised by how well it fits despite the fact that Takumi never asked for their measurements. It's almost as if he had duplicates of them that he could test the outfits on, but that would be crazy. Right. Takumi changes the subject before they start getting suspicious and asks them what they think of the weapons he made for them. Sophia pulls out the sword Takumi made for her and she says it feels perfect. The same goes for Maria as she tests out her battle knives and she is grateful for the equipment he made for her. There's one more thing Takumi made for the two of them, so he pulls out some rings and tells them it should help with their magic casting. Sophia and Maria accept the rings, but they feel bad about troubling Takumi so much since rings like these are bound to consume a ton of mana. Takumi admits that it was exhausting, but it helped him level up his ice and lightning magic, so it was well worth the effort. After all the equipment had been tested, the three of them head to the guild since Takumi needs to register Maria and Sophia at the guild so they can register as adventurers as well. Since this is their first time at the guild, Maria and Sophia are given the H rank. And while Takumi is here, the receptionist reminds him that he needs to complete at least one quest in order to maintain his status as an adventurer. So Takumi heads over the notice board to see if there are any good quests he can pick out. He is hoping to pick an H or G rank quest, so he doesn't have to do too much work, but Sophia thinks he would be better off choosing one of the higher difficulty quests since it would help him raise his rank. A couple of bastards overhear that Takumi is H rank, so they think they can intimidate him into running away so they can have fun with Sophia and Maria. They tell Takumi that they are all D rank, so there's no way he could handle them all at once, and they have no problem with beating up a random guy for fun. Maria is about to step in and knock some sense into these idiots, but Takumi stops her and says he will handle it himself. He's absolutely terrified, but these guys not only disrespected him, but more importantly, they disrespected his friends so he can't back down. The D rank guys are offended that an H rank noob like Takumi thinks he stands a chance against them. So the guy with the pot belly tries to punch him with all his might and Takumi just lets it happen. But the only one who gets hurt is the D rank guy because he broke his hand with that little stunt. All of a sudden the guild master, Barak, shows up and he demands to know what happened here because fighting is prohibited in the guild. At first he thinks Takumi is to blame for all the commotion since he is completely unharmed and the other guy has a broken arm. But Maria tells him Takumi did nothing wrong. The receptionist also backs up their story and explains to the guild master that all Takumi did was take a punch to the face. The guild master still wants to get to the bottom of this, so for now, he asks someone to drive the pot-belly guy away and tells Takumi and his party to come with him since he has a few questions to ask. He believes that Takumi was just defending himself, but he doesn't understand how he did it and would like an explanation. Takumi is a little uncomfortable about revealing personal skill information, but the guild master assures him that all of his information will remain confidential. In that case, Takumi explains that when the guy threw the punch at him, he opened his item box and pulled out a bit of charcoal, which he then used to coat his upper body for defense. And to make sure he wouldn't get hurt, he synthesized the charcoal into diamond. That explains how he broke that guy's fist without doing anything. But while they are on the topic, the guild master thinks it would be a good idea to promote Takumi to D rank immediately. He clearly has the skills to be D rank. And if his rank is high, idiots like the last guy won't be bold enough to go after him just because he has pretty ladies with him. Takumi doesn't think it'd be right for him to get an automatic promotion for no reason, so Hans suggests that Takumi and the others could complete a few difficult quests to justify their rank promotion, and both Sophia and Maria seem to think it's a good idea, so Takumi agrees as well. The quest they were assigned involves exterminating goblins and kobolds and then gather merrill herbs, so they head out into the forest to begin. Maple acts as the group's scout and warns them that there is a group of 4 goblins up ahead. Sophia takes the initiative and volunteers to handle the first 2, so she dashes forward and cuts them down in one swing. The remaining 2 are tripped up by Maple's web, and once they fall to the floor, Maria and Takumi stab them through the neck. Takumi is glad they are doing so well against the monsters, but with that said, they've been encountering way too many monsters out here. They've already killed nearly 100 goblins and kobolds, so Sophia thinks there must be a monster encampment nearby. And if that is the case, then there is likely also a goblin general there. A goblin general is a C-rank monster, meaning it would usually require at least 5 D-rank parties to defeat it, but with Sophia's spirit magic, Maria's earth magic, and Takumi's elemental magic, she is confident that they should be able to beat it. Takumi still feels a bit uneasy about taking on such a challenge, but since Maria and Sophia seem so confident in their strength, he's willing to go along with it. Not to mention they've still got Maple on their side, but all of a sudden, Maple tells Takumi she's about to evolve soon, so she can't fight anymore. Takumi understands and opens a pocket dimension so she can rest inside. But just like me, Sophia and Maria have many questions, like when the hell did Takumi learn to create pocket dimensions? Takumi brushes it off like it's normal and says this is just one of his skills, but more importantly, since Maple can't fight with him anymore, Takumi warns the others that they won't have as much support as they initially thought, but Sophia still thinks they can pull it off. They soon arrive at the goblin camp, and after a little reconnaissance, Sophia concludes that there are around 400 goblins here. Takumi asks her if they really have to fight all those goblins, and normally they would, but Sophia's reconnaissance also revealed that there are no humans in the area, so they are free to blow this place up with magic. The 3 of them prepare their strongest attack spells, and all at the same time they unleash hell on the goblin camp. By the time they are done, almost all the goblins have been killed, so the only ones left are the goblin general and a few of the goblin knights. Sophia says she will handle the goblin knights, so Takumi is left to deal with the goblin general, and rather than fight it with his spear, he opts to just set it on fire to finish it off. Once they've finally confirmed that all the goblins are dead, they gather all the magic stones and return to the guild. But the 3 of them are absolutely exhausted from all that work. Han can hardly believe that they managed to complete their quest and even took down a goblin general in only half a day, so he asks them to come to the meeting room for a minute because the guild master wants to see them. Barak is both amazed and angry that Takumi would do something as reckless as face an entire goblin camp with a single party, but just as he is about to begin scolding Takumi, his pocket dimension opens up and Maple pops out. She has now evolved into an Araking, so everyone is excited to see her new form, and at this point, Barak decides to just let the whole reckless battle thing slide since Takumi's party clearly isn't normal. Once they get back home, Maria asks Takumi if he has any spare cloth since she wants to make underwear for herself and Sophia, but Takumi has a much better idea for an underwear design, so he offers to make it for her instead. Just then, Maple pops out of the pocket dimension and tells Takumi that Papik is here to see him, so Takumi goes to meet with him and is informed that the Lord of Bolton, Marcus Godwin, wants to meet with him. Takumi would like to avoid meeting Marcus Godwin, but given the situation, he has no choice. Takumi later arrives at Godwin's castle, and thankfully, Godwin seems to be a reasonable man since the first thing he does is thank Takumi for making all those toilets because it greatly improved the sanitation of the town. Not to mention that Takumi took down a goblin encampment that would have become a major problem if left unchecked. He recognizes that Takumi is an asset to the nation, so he warns him that he will need to be careful, because Stedonia is bound to come after him eventually. A few days later, Takumi finally finishes making the underwear for Sophia and Maria, but it was way harder than he thought it would be, so he looks absolutely drained. Sophia and Maria are really grateful and tell him that they love the design, so he absent-mindedly asks them if they would like to try the underwear on now so he can see how it fits. A second later, he realizes that he just implied something inappropriate, so runs out of the room in embarrassment, and Maria and Sophia are a little disappointed because they were totally willing to do it if he had stayed. This was the end of episode 4. Subscribe to not miss the next part.